Since my last video, Bitcoin has capitulated another $10,000, and now we are very balanced in terms of the last two corrections. We got 33.6%, take roughly 2.3%, gets you 31.24, and pretty much bang on 2%, gets you 29.28. Now, obviously, those percentages are going to vary depending on exactly which exchange you are looking at, but right now, I think we have lots and lots of reasons to suggest a potential low. Now, if you follow Jason and Michael Pizzino, they have put out a couple of videos explaining why there is a potential for a bounce in this 88 to 92k price range. And I personally initiated a long at 92k over in my Bitcoin channel. So make sure you go up here into threads and join that channel if you are a TIA Premium member. And having a quick look at the weekly BX Trender, you can see there is still absolutely no buying pressure. We are continuing to make lower lows. However, one thing that we can note is the stochastic RSI is approaching one of its most oversold levels in this entire cycle. Now, if we have a look here, the only other times we were this low is at major bottoms. So March of 2023, we had July 2024, we had September 2023, obviously we had our FTX collapse. Or was that FTX? No, that was Luna, I believe, in June of 2022. So with the stochastic RSI this low on the weekly time frame, coupled by 7 weeks down on the BX Trender, which, if we historically look, 7 weeks down gets you pretty much around the lows. Like, you know, if you bought at 82k and sold anywhere in the 100 something K region, you'd be pretty happy. So based on no matter what analysis you use, I think the weekly chart is due for a rally. Now, where this rally goes to is obviously going to be up for a lot of debate. Now, having a look on the daily time frame, we are getting a higher low on the daily BX Trender, which you can see throughout this entire correction, we've only really seen one false signal here. Every other time we got a daily higher low, we ended up getting, multiple more daily higher lows and a decent rally of at least a couple $1,000, potentially, even $10,000 or so. So if we do get a $10,000 rally from here, that would take us to pretty much exactly 100k from the candle low. And if we got a $10,000 rally from the candle close, or potentially, like a 11k, 12k rally, we would be seeing somewhere in the $102,000 region, which would perfectly retest the lows of this liquidation bar on the 10th of October. Now, that's not going to be the same on every single exchange, but on Binance, Bybit, and a lot of the bigger exchanges with a lot of leverage, that would be a area to expect potential resistance. And ideally, we see a retest of $108,000 through to potentially $112,000. It's a region that Jason has talked about a lot in his videos, and Michael as well. And it's also a region where we have a lot of liquidation max pain levels. Now, I've been using this on the shorter and higher term timeframes a lot with the community over at TIA, and the daily max pain levels are almost hit exactly during a volatile day, like price stalls right on the long max pain. You might go through it by a couple $100, but then it'll whip up to take out the short max pain. And even if it comes shy by, $100 or so, it's still a very good indicator. But you can see here, short max pain is just under 112k on the monthly. And obviously we've got all our bottoms at around, we've got this swing top at just under 108k, and obviously all these previous lows and previous highs. So if we do manage to rally to 108k, I will definitely be taking very heavy profits. But this last low here at just under 100k, that 100k psychological level, and the fact that we've got a lot of lower time frame, short max pain levels around the 97 to 98k level makes me think that we could potentially require more than one daily swing to get up to that. So, we could see price come up to 97.5, pull back to 95k, test 100k, pull back to, 98k, test, 102k, come back to 100k, something like that. So, especially considering how fearful the market is, I just don't think we have that extreme greed buying to see, like a $20,000 swing straight up to 108k from here. Obviously, if it does happen, wonderful, but I don't think that is likely. Jumping down to the 4-hour time frame, we can see we've also got 97k as a significant resistance, which is the previous cycle's all-time high trend lines connected together. If you watch Jason on YouTube, he has that trend line in a lot of his videos. But one thing that I do like is we are on track to get, unless something crazy happens in the next 10 minutes, we're on track to get 3 4-hour green bars on the 4-hour BX trender. Now, the 4-hour BX trender is definitely not as strong as a daily or weekly, obviously, and it has printed a false signal here, but, at least if we get 3 4-hour up bars, we should see some consolidation before any move lower. And that consolidation, we can use the 15-minute and 1-hour time frames to identify whether we are potentially going to be moving up or down. Now, one thing I like on the 1-hour chart is the Gann swing indicator has turned up, and we are consolidating above the 1-hour TMA. Now, this 1-hour TMA line has served very, very well as support and resistance during this entire, capitulation. Since the all-time high, you can see when price is below it, it makes failed retest, failed retest, failed test, and price just has another move down. Whilst if we can get some sustainable price action on top of it, we can see some somewhat decent rallies. It's a 1-hour chart. You're not expecting a $20,000 move from a 1-hour chart. But I will be keeping my eyes very closely on that over at TIA in the Discord. I'll be posting my updates. And even on the 15-minute chart, you can see, if you're trading, $1,000, $2,000 moves on a high leverage or really big position size on spot, you can see when we're holding this 15-minute TMA, we're in a decent uptrend. What I don't want to see is closes, lower highs, failed retests, because that increases the chance of another swing down. Now, I don't think we're going to be breaking the low, but I do think we could wipe out the long max pain level and get those liquidations up to $1 billion, which, coupled with how out of balance our long and short ratio is, could be setting up for a higher low and some really fast acceleration to the north side of the market. Now, another thing that I find really interesting is right now, price is sitting right above the 50% level of the recent swing, and it looks like we've backtested it as well, holding it as support, which increases the chance that we'll be moving up to the 786 to 826 fib level, where we'll want to see if sellers step in or if price can cut right through it. Now, one thing I found really interesting is on this last little 4-hour swing, where I talked in the TIA Discord that we were getting, consecutive closes at the same level, wigs to the upside, failed moves, and this candle here looked like it wanted to break down. I think I posted around 95.1 in the Discord that rejecting off this smart money sell zone is never a good sign. Now, if you do follow Traders Helping Traders on YouTube, Peter has got a bunch of free courses for you that talks about the importance of this sell zone. And basically the psychology behind it is everyone who bought here expecting higher prices, they've ridden out this move down and they're expecting, a V-shaped recovery. Or some of them just want to sell out at a break even. And what this zone here does is it basically stops them from selling at a break even. It makes them hold their bags. So institutions who bought down here, say, 93K, 94K, they're selling at 95.8, 95.9 for a decent profit. And they're going to sell the price right through that previous low. And what happens is you get, cascading sell-off. Everyone who bought here panic sells. They panic sell the low. You get an even bigger cascading sell-off, and institutions snap it right back up around 90K. And, big money always wins. The house always wins, whatever you want to say. Looking at the USDT dominance, we have 7 days up, which is the exact opposite of Bitcoin, where we have 7 days down. Now, if you follow TIA, so Jason and Michael on YouTube, you're going to know that the 7-day reversal rule is almost always guaranteed to play out. At least we'll get a pause, if not a major correction. And we can see if we do manage to close in the next 7 minutes with a lower high on the daily BX trender, that is also a good sign that could lead to a multi-day down move for USDT dominance and hopefully a multi-day up move for Bitcoin that I'm predicting. Over here, on the weekly chart, you can see the stochastic RSI is massively overbought, which is the exact opposite of Bitcoin. So a relief rally into a, previous resistance zone is definitely on the cards. And having a quick look at the DXY, you can see we've rejected off the 50% level, 7 weeks up. We've got all this buying pressure, but price really isn't going anywhere, which suggests weakness. So even if we chop around for a few more weeks, I do suggest this trend to resolve itself to the downside in the future. Now, another thing that has been really interesting is altcoins have seen a much stronger bounce than Bitcoin has. So I'm predicting, especially with Sol and CRO, like we've seen some really nice price action these last few hours. So, altcoins could potentially see, a bigger move up than Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin, goes, let's say, 10 or 15% up here, we could be seeing, altcoins rally all the way back into previous resistance, which for Solana, where we've got the daily 50 TMA from the underside, would be, $180 potentially, or somewhere along the previous tops, or slightly lower top, so if we've got a top at 170, we can see Sol rally to, $165, which would be, a bigger move than Bitcoin. Same with CRO here, we could see another lower high, potentially, 13 cents, which would be still from here nearly a 20% move, which would be double what I'm potentially expecting Bitcoin to make. So that's some interesting analysis for you. A quick look at the S&P 500. You can clearly see the BX trender is just showing selling pressure, and we're actually approaching the market bias from the top side. So, we could see another sell-off to, 6,500 points, but judging by how quickly we are seeing the stochastic RSI reset, and the fact that how much fear is in the market, if you watch, Jason's videos on YouTube, he has a whole bunch of analysis on how fearful everyone is, makes me think that we're probably closer to a low than a top right now. Same with like Nvidia, we're still holding support on the market bias, and all of our big tech stocks, it's not like we're getting massive capitulations, closes and lower highs under the market bias. We're selling into it. Same with Tesla. Like, I could obviously talk for 20 minutes, and obviously Google with all that latest news based pump. Now, Google here, I do potentially see this divergence on the BX trender where price has gone higher, but the BX trender has made lower highs. Could potentially lead to, at least a sideways chop, similar to what we saw here. Potential correction, but, same with Apple. This is on a monthly chart. If I switch to a weekly chart, you can see the stock market definitely looks good with the exception of Meta. Like, I think right now, other than Meta, Netflix, MicroStrategy, Coinbase, everything else is potentially sitting in a buy zone. So obviously I wouldn't go all in right now because, there's just no signs of a bottom. We could sell off, like another 10, 15%. All these stocks that are sitting above the market bias could come down to the bottom of the market bias, and that would give you an even better entry opportunity. Now, I personally don't like buying stocks that are underneath the market bias unless they're hitting, important fib level or previous top or something like that. So, or they're showing signs of a bottom in, like what we saw here in April, like a weekly higher low close on the weekly BX trender. Just because, when you start to see closes and lower highs under the market bias, you could see something like what MicroStrategy happens. It just absolutely capitulates. Now, I don't think the big tech stocks and the AI stocks are going to capitulate like that. But this close to the end of the cycle, where if you watched my last video, I'm predicting we potentially only have, 7 or 8 months left. I just don't want to be buying the dip aimlessly. I want to be buying, stocks that are strong, like what Jason always says. I'm not buying stuff because it's cheap. I'm buying stuff that is in a strong uptrend, but not right at the peaks in a potential discount zone. But anyways, enough talk about that. Having a quick look over at fear and greed on Bitcoin. Again, we've got extreme fear. Like, we've printed some of our lowest readings since, we saw our tariff trade low. That was fear and greed of 10, which was pretty much the exact same as what we're seeing right now. And if we do some historic backtesting, which I'm not going to do, but some of the members over in TIA Premium have done, it almost always leads to at least a pause in the trend when you see this much extreme fear, and potentially even a reversal. Now, the FOMO Finder is very interesting because the FOMO Finder has actually not shown much panic. Like we saw all the panic up here. But down here, it's been sitting imbalanced. And obviously, with our move down in the last 24 hours, it's now moved into uncertainty. So, potentially, we could still go a bit lower and see, a panic or capitulation reading on the FOMO Finder. But based on everything else, I don't think that's going to happen, which is where we come to what, Jason always says, don't be wed to one form of analysis. You've got to look at the market with many different forms of analysis. Like, if you've got 9 indicators telling you where the potential low, but one saying we could still go lower, well, I would take that long trade every single day of the week. Now, having a look at the Forex Factory, you can see we do have some high volatility announcements coming up, where we do have FOMC meeting minutes coming up at the end of the Wednesday market session for the US, which is going to be Thursday morning for us in Australia. And, a couple of other unemployment rate. Obviously, you can look at this yourself and set it to your time zone. So, potentially, if we get some nice economic data, that could be what we need to spur Bitcoin for another leg up. Anyways, thank you all for watching, and please like, comment, and subscribe. Goodbye.